Hi, I'm Ashley, and today I'll be talking about sexuality and gender identity during adolescence. So let's get into it. I have a table of contents here just as a brief overview of what we'll be discussing today. So I start out with the background, defining adolescence and some of the developmental domains that affect this area of development. And then we get into the topic, so understanding sex, gender, and sexuality, defining these terms, differentiating them, and then understanding adolescent sexual development and how sexuality relates to this, and then some of the affecting factors, and of course, linking back to some of the theories we're learning in class. Then we get into a conclusion, and also I included a little glossary of some of the terms so you guys can better understand them, and a reference so then you guys can read over those two peer-reviewed articles that I found, or if you just want more information to read, then feel free to. Okay, let's get into it. So first, this information I've taken from more of the lecture slides, so it's consistent with what we're learning. So adolescence is defined as a transitional phase, and so basically we're going from childhood into adulthood, and it's a larger period of our life as it goes on from 10 to 19 years of age. And right now we're in stage 5 of Erik Erikson's 8 stages of development, so we're reaching close to the end. And this is identity versus identity confusion. So basically, who are we? We're figuring out our roles, and like success in this phase, in this stage means we'll have a good understanding of who we are and what we want to do in the future. And then failure of this phase is just we'll end up with some confusion on who we are and our roles and who we want to be, right? And then major influences or key influences on this development, or right now we're trying to understand who we are, so that's more with our identity. We're trying to understand our roles and our own views of the world. And then this is where we get into the idea of family, because our family may have different views than the ones we are currently developing, right? And they may not be accepting to these views, which could create conflict. And this relates to sexuality because they could have different views than you on sexuality, right? And then there's also the same thing for peer relationships. We really want to be accepted by peers at this age. We want to be seen as cool. You know, our peers can influence us. They could bully us, and bullying could lead us to changing or hiding potentially who we are or want to be. So yeah, and then on top of that, so basically we're trying to figure out who we are. Our family is working against us, not accepting us, and then with the social relationships, we could be getting bullied, and then finally we get into the physical, which is puberty. So now we got all these raging hormones, and we don't know what to do with them, right? Actually, it's hard for us to even like deal with them because balancing hormones is kind of all internal, and there's not much we can do except for give them time to balance out in our body, right? So a lot's going on here. Anyways, let's get into it. So, what is sex? What is gender? And what is sexuality, right? So first, I wanted to start off with what is sex? I want to start off with the biological component, as this is the first thing, like our first understanding of this topic of when we're born, right? Because we're given either male or female as our sex when we are born. So yeah, so I want to start with that because I feel like it's the first component of this. So what is sex? It's referred to our biological attributes associated with physical and physiological features. So like our chromosomes, XY is male, XX is female, gene expression, so how these chromosomes express themselves in our body, hormone levels and function, sexual anatomy, and then of course what are the types of sex, male, female, and intersex, which is where chromosomes have variations. So you might be a man and you might have like a penis, but then your chromosomes or genes express themselves differently, and you might actually develop breasts later on in life just because you might have like an extra X chromosome or an extra Y chromosome, right? So those are more like a genetic disorder area of topic, and this is all very biological, okay? Like this is your hormones, this is estrogen, testosterone, this is XY, this is like all on the inside, and like what your genitals are, right? And then we get into this concept of gender. So the prior one was biological, This one's socially constructed, right? Those are the key differences of this. They do tie into each other, but key difference, biological is sex, the thing you're born with at birth. Gender, socially constructed. So this refers to the roles, right? And I do have a brief description from the Government of Canada website. I chose this website as this course is being taken place in Canada, so I felt using Canadian definitions would be most relevant for us. So basically, these are the socially constructed roles, the roles and behaviors. So, you think about typical gender roles, how women, cook and clean, and men do like the yard work and the building, right? So, then we get into the male and female and then the non-binary. So people who are non-binary or gender fluid may feel like they fit in neither of these roles. So they may have attributes of male, even though they were born female as their sex. They may want to wear male clothing. They may not feel comfortable in dresses or typical female clothing, right? Or vice versa. It might be a man who feels more comfortable in a dress. And yeah, that's okay. So these are kind of like the different genders. There are more, and it's more just what you resonate with. So I resonate most with like girly things. I like pink. I like girly things, my girly cup. I like listening to like girly music. I like Barbies. I'm like all about ultra femininity sometimes, except I do have these masculine attributes where I also like to lift and fish and do, my manly things, but I still consider my gender and my gender identity as being a woman, right? But then we get into this idea of transgenderism, where people experience gender dysphoria. And this term definitely goes with people who are transgender. They experience this gender dysphoria, feeling they were born in the wrong body. So they were born and assigned female at birth, for example, but then maybe later on in life they notice that they resonate a lot more and feel more like a man, right? They may feel they need a penis. They may feel they need to have a more masculine attire or more masculine roles in life, and it just it can cause a lot of conflict for them in their life. But anyway, so those are some of the different types of genders. There's other genders, as I was kind of mentioning before, because people have different ways of identifying themselves. They might be non-binary, but identify more with masculine traits. So that would be a part of their identity and how they might go about describing their gender to you, right? And with gender, and with that one, you get different pronouns. So there's she, her, he, him, they, them. There is other ones, so be sure to ask people if you are unsure what their pronouns are before making the assumption of what they are, or what they resonate with, I should say. So yeah, most of the time non-binary people go by they, them, but if they also resonate more with like masculine attributes, they may say they, them, he, him, right? So you can use both, right? So if they are dressed as a male that day and you say, oh, he's doing this, when really sometimes they go by they, them, it's still accepted. They still view themselves as a male and are still very accepting to you calling them the he, him over just the they, them, right? So make sure you ask people these questions and what their preferences are. It's really good to know. And it can help with some of their confusion and help with their identity formation as well, right? And then this was just a little interesting fact to show you how like relevant this is towards our identity and how soon we start gathering these concepts, because we start gathering concepts of gender as early as 3. So it's like, I am a girl, I'm going to wear a dress, or I understand I am a boy or a girl, right? And like, my peer is a girl, so she has long hair, where I am a boy, so I have short hair right now, right? So that's kind of like how they view it as a child. But we are talking about adolescence, not child, but this is when this idea of identity starts forming, right? So it's a big thing throughout our life. So moving forward, so what is sexuality? So this is more our sexual orientation. So it's who we are attracted to and who we want to be with, right? So there's different types of orientation. There's straight, so same sex, right? Oh no, not same sex, sorry, that's the next one. But so there's straight, meaning you are attracted to the opposite sex, same sex, or gay or lesbian, but lesbian is exclusive to female and female love, whereas gay is more of a broader term for both. And then there's bisexual, which is attracted to same sex or opposite sex, both. And then pansexual is a little bit more broad, so it's the same idea, but then it's like broader in a sense that you may be attracted to people who are non-binary as well. You may also be attracted to people who are transgender. You know, you're like not as exclusive. You're very open to, and just open to loving different people. And then there's asexual, which is the complete opposite. You don't have a lot of sexual attraction, if any, you know, you just don't feel sexually active the same way as other people do. And then two-spirit, which is an indigenous term, but not all indigenous people resonate with this. And it actually is closer to them being non-binary gay. Like, that's the way I've understand it. It's more like non-binary, where they don't fit into these male and female roles, and then they have the opposite sex attraction, right? Or the same sex attraction. So it's a little bit different than our understanding of gay, but it's a little bit the same in some ways, right? But yeah, not all indigenous people who are gay are considered two-spirited. So you should ask them if they consider themselves two-spirited before just assuming that all indigenous people who are gay are two-spirited, right? And then of course there's more, so feel free to just always ask people if they, of course if they're willing, but yeah, just make sure you get to know someone before assuming their sexual orientation or gender, right? Ask lots of questions. Clarify. But anyways, moving on. Now we're talking about sex and gender, so it's kind of just like a little summary because, and I like this quote again from the Canada government website, how sex and gender are often used interchangeably despite having different meanings. So that's the idea that sex is biological, and then whereas gender is socially constructed, right? So yeah, and there are two main factors influencing sexuality and gender identity during development. There's biological, so these are the hormones, the puberty we're talking about. You know, are you getting more estrogen? Are you getting more testosterone? Like, how does that affect you? Yeah, and then environmental, so religion, family, and socioeconomic status. So yeah, we'll get more into that now. Well, actually, we're going to get into this. So Erik Erikson. So adolescents are now in the identity versus identity confusion phase, so they're trying to figure out who they are. So gender is definitely a large component of this because we have to figure out how we want to express ourselves and like the roles, right? And this whole idea of identity that he's talking about is that we need to understand our roles in adolescence in order to understand our roles later in life, right? And who we're going to be and how we, like, what our demeanor is, or what our self-image is, what we're going to do when we get older. And gender can really play a large factor because are we going to act like a girl? Are we going to act like a male? Or are we going to act like a both, right? Are we going to have a male job? Like male, I don't want to categorize, but you know. Or are we going to have a stereotypical female job? Like, what do we resonate with? Or is it just going to be our job, to be honest? But just to provide some understanding, right? And then gender and sexuality is there, yeah, and this is what I'm already prior talking to. I'm just getting a little ahead of myself. And yeah, so we could have uncertainty towards our roles and uncertainty towards our sexual orientation, right? So there's some of the theories. And then if we look here, the effects of sexual orientation, of sexuality and gender development in adolescence. So some of the factors affecting it is our peers. As mentioned, people could be bullied for their sexual orientation. For example, sometimes in smaller towns, people often, they're not very accepting, right? So they may have more religious beliefs and they may be a little bit more like closed-minded to say, and they could just be not accepting of these new views, right? And it's the same as family views. They may not be accepting to the child coming out. You know, they might be accepting to gay, but they might not be accepting to transgender. And they may just want their boy to dress like a boy instead of a girl, and this can create huge conflict within the adolescents because, you know, they can't be who they feel they want to be, right? And they can't express themselves the way they need to. So now they have this whole dilemma, and they're not themselves. So they end up with a lot of identity confusion in this aspect. Right? And then now we get into socioeconomic status, which is very interesting because they may not have the income to properly express themselves. This is something we don't always think about because maybe we have the luxury of being able to purchase whatever clothes we want, maybe when we want. Like, I don't always have that luxury, but I can purchase. If I wanted to become a boy, I could financially support that. But if you did not, then how are you supposed to deal with this transition, right? And then there's also this idea of surgeries. There's the top and bottom, and these do cost a lot of money. And if you don't have the money to do that, your your gender dysphoria could suffer immensely, right? Because you may feel you want breasts to look like a woman, and you can't have these breasts, right? You can't gain the surgery to do that, or vice versa. The breasts are causing you the breasts are disrupting your self-image thoughts because you're looking at a woman, but you feel like a man, right? And then religion. Not all religions accept modern views on gender and sexuality. It's just plain and simple. Religion and culture, you could be brought up in a very traditional rural house, or just have that culture surrounded you, or live in a country where it's just like it's actually a law where you can't be gay, right? And that can create a lot of dilemmas in teenagers. We're still young, we're just trying to figure out, and now apparently it's illegal to be myself, right? Like, imagine figuring that out. It's a very touchy subject, and it's a very large component of our identity. And anyways, now we get into the conclusion. We're summing it up. I'm gone a little bit over, so I'll keep it short and quick. But sexuality and gender during adolescence is an evolving process that changes over time with circumstance and influence. And I feel like this is a very good closing statement because we've already kind of gone over all these things, and it's kind of reiterating some of my points at this point. But yeah, it's an ever-changing process, and you know, new facts can cause us to decide new options, right? We could learn something from our peers, and then we could decide to express it ourselves. And the same goes for our sexuality. So yeah, moving on to finally the glossary with some of the terms. You guys can go over this if you would like, but I'll go over two-spirited to give you guys a better understanding just at the end. So an indigenous term used to describe the complex nature of gender and sexuality related culture, identity, roles, and experience of the person, right? And just again, not all indigenous people resonate with this idea. Okay, and oh, just make sure to ask, right? Not all indigenous people resonate with this concept, so make sure you asked if they are two-spirited. Yes. And finally, we get into references. Yeah, so my two peer-reviewed are the third one, Hernandez. I apologize for that. I promise I read it. And the one by Carr right here, Understanding Normal Development of Adolescence and Sexuality, a Bumpy Ride. So yeah, if you guys want to read more into those two, this is where I got most of my information, along with the Government of Canada website and our lecture slides. But yeah, thanks guys, have a good one, good luck on the midterms, and I hope this was helpful. Be sure to watch the videos I've linked in there. I forgot to mention that, but I did link another video, and it just goes over again some of these ideas of gender and sexual orientation. But yeah, thanks guys, have a good one, bye now.